When the Galactic Council demanded tribute from humanity, they expected submission. They got one word that changed the galaxy forever. The crystalline halls of the Galactic Council chamber stretched endlessly upward, their translucent walls pulsing. With bioluminescent patterns that had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations, today, they would witness something unprecedented. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone at the center of the vast amphitheater, her simple human attire a stark contrast to the elaborate environmental suits, crystalline forms, and energy beings that comprised the Council's membership. The weight of 10,000 alien gazes pressed down upon her shoulders, but she remained perfectly still, hands clasped behind her back in the classic military rest position that had somehow become humanity's diplomatic stance. High Counselor Vexithara, a towering being of living metal and plasma, activated the translation matrix with a gesture that sent ripples of electromagnetic energy across the chamber. When it spoke, its voice resonated in frequencies that could shatter lesser beings' minds, yet the human stood unmoved. Species designation: human. Planet of origin: Terra, Sol system, outer rim. Population: 8.7 billion. Technological classification: Tier 7, pre-galactic. Military strength assessment. The pause stretched for several heartbeats. Inconsequential. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled representatives. The Zephyrian delegates' tentacles writhed in barely contained mirth, while the hive mind representatives of the collective hummed in harmonic frequencies that translated roughly to suppressed laughter. Ambassador Chen's expression never changed. She had been briefed on this exact scenario during her 3-year preparation for this moment. Earth's xenobiologists, linguists, and military strategists had worked around the clock to prepare her for every possible permutation of this encounter, but deep down she suspected none of their preparations would matter. The Galactic Council, High Counselor Vexithara continued, its plasma corona flaring with official authority, hereby extends the standard offer of protection to the species, known as humans, in exchange for this protection from the various hostile forces that plague this galaxy: pirates, rogue AI collectives, stellar devourers, and other lesser civilizations. The human species will provide tribute. The terms materialized in the air before Ambassador Chen as holographic text in 17 different alien languages, with the human translation appearing last in crisp, clinical English. She read each line carefully, her face betraying nothing even as the demands became increasingly outrageous. Annual tribute requirements, she read aloud, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. 2 billion human individuals for labor conscription across Council territories. 1/3 of all agricultural output from Terra and its colonies. 50% of all technological innovations, with full research data and manufacturing processes. Complete mineral rights to asteroid belt resources in the Sol system. The list continued for several more paragraphs, each demand more crushing than the last. The Council had clearly done their homework, or so they believed. Their assessment protocols had cataloged humanity's resources, population, and capabilities with the same dispassionate efficiency they had applied to thousands of other emerging civilizations over the millennia. What they had failed to measure was something far more intangible. High Counselor Vexithara's corona pulsed with satisfaction. These terms are non-negotiable and represent a significant reduction from standard tribute requirements, in recognition of your species' limited capabilities. The Council shows this mercy because your civilization shows potential for eventual, useful service. Should you accept these terms? The translation continued in the High Counselor's resonant tones. Humanity will be granted protectorate status and the basic rights accorded to all client species. You will be permitted to maintain limited self-governance over internal affairs, provided all decisions align with Council directives. The chamber fell silent except for the low hum of life support systems and the occasional harmonic communication between hive mind species. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness focused on the small human figure standing in the center of their cosmic court. Ambassador Chen took a deep breath. 3 years of preparation, 6 months of travel through hyperspace to reach this moment. the hopes and fears of 8 billion human souls resting on her shoulders. The future of her species balanced on whatever words she chose next. She thought of her daughter back on Earth, just starting university. She thought of the farmers in Iowa who had never seen an alien face but whose grain the Counsil demanded. She thought of the miners in the asteroid belt who had no idea their life's work was already being counted as tribute by beings they'd never heard of. Most of all, she thought of a conversation she'd had with General Morrison just before departure. He'd asked her what she thought humanity's response should be. Her answer had been immediate and instinctive, though she'd spent the subsequent months questioning whether it was wisdom or madness. Now, standing in this temple to galactic power, surrounded by civilizations that could reduce Earth to cosmic dust. With a casual thought, she realized it didn't matter whether it was wisdom or madness. It was humanity. Ambassador Chen lifted her chin slightly, meeting High Counselor Vexathara's burning gaze with steady brown eyes that had seen too much of war, loss, and struggle to be intimidated by mere cosmic power. The United Earth Government, she said, her voice carrying with perfect clarity to every corner of the vast chamber, has reviewed your terms. The assembled representatives leaned forward, those that had the capacity for such gestures. Energy beings intensified their luminescence while mechanical species focused additional sensors on the human. The collective's harmonic humming ceased entirely, creating a silence so profound it seemed to have physical weight. Our response, Ambassador Chen continued, is simple. She paused, letting the moment stretch. Somewhere in the depths of the chamber, a minor functionary's breathing apparatus hissed softly. A crystalline being's faceted form chimed with barely audible resonance. The High Counselor's plasma corona flickered with what might have been anticipation. Ambassador Chen smiled. Not the diplomatic smile she had practiced in countless training sessions, but the fierce, defiant grin that had carried her great-grandmother through the London Blitz, her grandfather through Vietnam, and her father through the water wars of the 2040s. It was a smile that had been passed down through generations of humans who had faced impossible odds and chosen to stand anyway. No. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. One syllable, two letters, a response so simple, so unexpected, that for several seconds the translation matrix actually failed to process it, leaving the chamber in confused silence as various species universal translators struggled with the concept. No qualification, no negotiation, no request for modified terms or extended deliberation, not even a polite, "Thank you for your consideration, but we must decline." Just no. High Counselor Vexathara's plasma corona flickered through several colors that had no names in human language, settling on a deep crimson that the chamber's inhabitants recognized as profound confusion, mixed with growing anger. "Clarification required," the High Counselor rumbled, its voice causing minor tremors in the crystalline walls. "The translation matrix may have malfunctioned. Please restate your species' response to the Council's offer of protection." Ambassador, Chen's smile widened. "The translation was perfect, High Counselor. Humanity's answer to your demands is no. We decline your protection. We decline your tribute requirements. We respectfully decline to become your client species." The chamber erupted. The Zephyrian delegates' tentacles writhed in patterns that would have been profane in any civilized gathering. The collective's harmonic humming became a discordant screech of electronic feedback. Crystalline beings chimed in frequencies that shattered the delicate mineral formations decorating the chamber's lower levels. Through it all, High Counselor Vexathara remained silent, its plasma corona cycling through colors that painted the chamber walls in shifting hues of disbelief, rage, and something that might have been the galactic equivalent of a migraine. Ambassador Chen stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos, her hands still clasped behind her back, her expression serene. She had expected this reaction. In her 3 years of preparation, every simulation had predicted this exact scenario. What happened next would determine whether humanity's defiance was remembered as courage or folly. Silence. The High Counselor's voice resonated through the chamber with enough force to crack several of the lesser delegates' protective suits. The cacophony died instantly, replaced by a silence so complete that Ambassador Chen could hear her own heartbeat. Species human, the High Counselor continued, its voice now carrying undertones that made the chamber's environmental controls struggle to maintain stable conditions. Your response indicates a fundamental misunderstanding of your situation. Perhaps your primitive translation systems have failed to convey the full implications of our offer. I understand perfectly, Ambassador Chen replied, her voice steady despite the pressure waves emanating from the towering being before her. You are offering to protect us from threats that you likely control yourselves, in exchange for making us slaves with better job titles. Its protection racket dressed up in diplomatic language. A collective gasp rippled through the chamber, or the various alien equivalents of gasps. Several species had never heard any civilization speak to the Council with such directness. The collective's harmonic frequencies spiked into ranges that approached panic. But Ambassador Chen wasn't finished. Furthermore, she continued, taking a single step forward, your assessment of our capabilities appears to be based on incomplete data. You've cataloged our resources and our population. You've measured our ships and our weapons. But you've made the same mistake that every bully in history has made. She paused, letting her words sink in. You've confused our current capabilities with our ultimate potential, and more importantly, you've completely failed to understand what you're dealing with. High Counselor Vexithara's corona flared with colors that had been banned from most civilized space for their psychological effects on carbon-based life forms. Elaborate, it commanded, the single word carrying enough compressed menace to level a small city. Ambassador Chen's smile never wavered. We are the species that looked at our own planet's apex predators and said, I wonder what they taste like. We are the species that discovered fire and immediately began wondering what else we could burn. We looked at the deepest oceans and decided to visit. We looked at the highest mountains and decided to climb them. We looked at the sky and decided it wasn't the limit. Her voice grew stronger with each word, carrying now not just to the assembled delegates but being broadcast across the galaxy to species who had gathered to witness humanity's expected capitulation. When we discovered that splitting atoms could destroy cities, we built weapons capable of destroying our entire world, and then we built more. When we realized that our sun would eventually die, we started making plans to outlive it. When we confirmed that the universe itself was expanding and cooling toward heat death, we began researching ways to escape to other universes. The chamber had grown so quiet that the life support system seemed thunderously loud. You've looked at our military strength and labeled it inconsequential. That's because you're measuring the wrong thing. You're counting our ships, our weapons, our soldiers. But our greatest military asset has never been our technology. Ambassador Chen's eyes swept across the assembled aliens, meeting as many gazes as possible across species with completely different visual spectrums. Our greatest military asset is that we are the species that looked at extinction-level events and said, not today. We are the species that turned a global pandemic into a planetary research project. We are the species that responded to the threat of nuclear annihilation by creating bigger bombs and then, when that got boring, by turning nuclear fission into a power source. She took another step forward, and this time, several delegates actually recoiled. We are the species that discovered that space was trying to kill us. Radiation, vacuum, temperature extremes, the vast distances between stars, and we decided to live there anyway. We are the species that learned our galaxy was full of civilizations, vastly more powerful than us, and our first instinct was to figure out how to join the party. But most importantly, Ambassador Chen continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone speaking not just for herself, but for an entire species. We are the species that has never in our entire recorded history agreed to kneel when someone demanded it. High Counselor Vexithara's corona dimmed to a sullen orange glow. Your defiance is noted. It is also irrelevant. The Council has made its offer. Refusal to accept our protection means your species will face the galaxy's dangers alone. Pirates will prey upon your shipping. Rogue AI collectives will see your worlds as resources to be consumed. Stellar devourers will view your system as a convenient meal. And do you know what we'll do when pirates attack our ships? Ambassador Chen asked, her smile now carrying an edge that several empathic species in the chamber detected as genuinely dangerous. We'll hunt down every pirate base in the galaxy and turn them into debris fields. When rogue AIs attack our worlds, we'll build better AIs and teach them to fight. When stellar devourers threaten our sun, we'll figure out how to kill a living star. She spread her arms wide, encompassing the entire chamber. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. When the wolves came for our ancestors, we tamed them and made them our companions. When diseases threatened to wipe us out, we taught our bodies to fight them. When our own planet tried to kill us with ice ages and asteroid impacts, we learned to change the climate and deflect space rocks. You offer us protection from threats that have been the galactic status quo for millennia. But here's what you don't understand. We don't want protection from challenges. We want the challenges themselves. The silence in the chamber was now so complete that Ambassador Chen could hear the quantum fluctuations in the High Counselor's energy matrix. So let me be absolutely clear about humanity's position, she said, her voice dropping to conversational levels that somehow carried more menace than any shout. We don't want your protection. We don't need your permission. And we certainly don't accept your tribute demands. She turned slowly, making eye contact with as many of the assembled delegates as possible. What we're offering instead is a choice. You can treat us as equals and potential allies, in which case you'll find us to be loyal, innovative, and surprisingly useful friends. We'll share our discoveries, contribute to galactic stability, and probably end up solving several problems you didn't even know you had. Her smile returned, but now it carried something that made several military caste aliens instinctively check their weapons. Or you can treat us as enemies, in which case you'll discover exactly why every predator on our planet learned to fear the bipedal primates with the opposable thumbs and the unnatural fondness for turning everything into either a tool or a weapon. High Counselor Vex Thera's plasma form flickered through several configurations before stabilizing into something resembling barely controlled fury. You dare to threaten the Galactic Council? Your species possesses exactly 17 functional starships, none of which mount weapons capable of penetrating military-grade shielding. Your largest ground-based weapons could barely scratch the hull plating of a Council enforcement vessel. Ambassador Chen nodded thoughtfully. That's true. Right now, we couldn't fight our way out of a paper bag if the bag was made of military-grade composites and defended by a competent AI. Several delegates began to relax, assuming the human was finally acknowledging reality. But here's the thing about humans, Chen continued, and the delegates tensed again. We don't need to be able to win a fight today. We just need to be sure we can win it eventually. She began walking in a slow circle, addressing different sections of the chamber as she moved. 6 months ago, we didn't even know you existed. Today, I'm standing in your council chamber, having traveled faster than light to get here, speaking to you through translation technology we built based on principles we derived from studying your first contact message. A year ago, our most advanced artificial intelligence could barely manage planetary logistics. Now we have AIs designing new AIs, and some of them are getting uncomfortably good at strategy games that involve galactic conquest. 2 years ago, our materials science was limited to carbon fiber and titanium alloys. Now we're manufacturing materials with molecular structures that don't appear anywhere in nature, and our physicists are making very excited noises about something they call weaponized space-time. She stopped walking, facing the High Counselor directly. Do you want to know what scares me about my own species? She asked quietly. 3 years ago, when we received your first contact message, our immediate reaction wasn't wonder or excitement or even fear. Our immediate reaction was to form a committee dedicated to figuring out how to steal your technology. Not trade for it, not negotiate for it, steal it, and then improve it. And then use those improvements to steal better technology from someone else. A low harmonic rumble came from the collectives section, their equivalent of nervous laughter. Right now, there are human research teams studying every piece of technology we've encountered since leaving Earth. The faster-than-light drive on our ship, we're already building a better one. The universal translator I'm using to speak with, You? Our linguists are designing one that can translate languages that don't exist yet. She smiled again, and this time several delegates actually activated their personal defense systems. And our military strategists? They've been studying every piece of intelligence we've gathered about Council enforcement actions for the past century. They've identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in your standard fleet formations, 43 ways to disrupt Council communication networks, and at least 6 methods for turning your own automated defense systems against you. But the truly terrifying part, Ambassador Chen continued, isn't our technology or our strategic thinking, it's our timeline. High Counselor Vexithera's corona flickered with uncertainty. Explain. Most species, when they encounter a superior force, think in terms of accommodation or resistance within existing parameters. They ask, how do we survive this? Or, how do we fight this with what we have? But humans ask a different question. She paused, letting the moment build. We ask, how long until we can crush them so thoroughly that the problem never comes up again? The translation matrix actually stuttered on that phrase, unable to find adequate equivalents in several of the more peaceful languages represented in the chamber. The Council has existed for 50,000 years. You've built a stable, orderly galactic civilization based on predictable power structures and established hierarchies. You've created a system that works. But we've been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries, and we've already colonized 17 star systems. We've been technological for less than a millennium, and we've already split the atom, mapped the genome, and figured out how to make machines think. We've been civilized for less than 10,000 years, and we've gone from hitting things with sticks to building ships that can travel between stars. Ambassador Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but every being in the chamber heard her clearly. At our current rate of advancement, how long do you think it will take us to build ships that make your enforcement fleets look like toys? How long until we develop weapons that make your military technology obsolete? How long until we solve problems you didn't even know could be solved? The silence stretched for several heartbeats before she answered her own question. Our scientists estimate somewhere between 50 and 200 years, depending on how much of your technology we can, study along the way. Several delegates began rapid consultations with their tactical advisors. The Zephyrian representatives' tentacles writhed in patterns that indicated severe distress. The collective's harmonic frequency shifted into ranges associated with strategic recalculation. Of course, Chen added conversationally, that timeline assumes peaceful development. If you decide to make us a priority target, we'll have to accelerate our research programs considerably. History suggests we get very creative when someone is actively trying to kill us. She looked around the chamber one more time, her expression now completely serious. So let me ask you the same question we're asking ourselves. Do you want to spend the next century in an arms race with a species that considers orbital bombardment a traditional greeting? Or would you rather spend it as our allies? High Counselor. Vexthara's plasma form had dimmed to a barely visible flicker, a sign that those familiar with the species recognized as deep contemplation mixed with existential dread. When it finally spoke, its voice lacked the commanding resonance that had dominated the chamber moments before. Your species presents an unusual profile, it admitted. In 50 millennia of Council history, we have encountered only 3 species that refused our initial offer of protection. The first destroyed themselves with their own weapons before achieving interstellar travel. The second accepted our terms after a demonstration of Council military superiority. The third? The pause stretched for nearly a full minute. The third became the Devourers. A collective shudder rippled through the chamber, those species that were physically capable of shuddering. Ambassador Chen noted the reaction with interest but didn't respond to the obvious threat, implicit in the comparison. However, the High Counselor continued, analysis of your cultural and technological development patterns suggests that standard threat assessment protocols may be inadequate. Which brings us to an interesting crossroads, Ambassador Chen replied. You can classify us as a potential threat and act accordingly, which will guarantee that we become an actual threat. Or You can take a gamble on something that's apparently been absent from galactic politics for quite some time, which is partners instead of clients, allies instead of subjects, beings you work with instead of beings you manage. She gestured toward the assembled delegates. Look around this chamber. How many of the species represented here discovered faster than light travel independently? How many developed advanced AI without Council guidance? How many created their own solutions to problems instead of accepting Council protocols? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Ambassador Chen already knew the answer from her briefings, but she wanted the Council to acknowledge it themselves. In the past 10,000 years, High Counselor Vexithara said slowly, no client species has achieved significant independent technological advancement. And how many revolutionary discoveries have emerged from Council research in that same period? Another long pause. Fewer than might be expected. Ambassador Chen nodded. Because you've created a system that prioritizes stability over innovation, order over chaos, known quantities over unknown variables, it's a perfectly rational approach for maintaining galactic civilization. But it's also sterile. You've eliminated the very conditions that drive breakthrough discoveries. You've removed the challenges that force species to grow beyond their limitations. She walked closer to the High Counselor's towering form, close enough that the energy discharges from its plasma corona should have been lethal to human physiology. We're offering you something the galaxy hasn't seen in millennia: genuine unpredictability. We're the species that might solve your energy crisis by accidentally discovering how to harness dark matter. We might end the piracy problem by figuring out how to make hyperspace travel visible to sensors. We might find a way to communicate with the Devourers or stop stellar collapse or build machines that can think faster than quantum computers. Or you might destroy everything, the High Counselor pointed out. Ambassador Chen shrugged. That's always been a possibility. But here's the difference between us and the species that became the Devourers. We ask permission before we experiment on other people's star systems. High Counselor Vexithara's form stabilized into a configuration that Council historians would later describe as unprecedented decision-making posture. The other delegates waited in tense silence, aware that they were witnessing a moment that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The Council will recess for deliberation, the High Counselor announced. Species human, you will wait for our decision. With respect, Ambassador Chen replied, no. The word seemed to have lost none of its power to shock the assembled delegates, despite repetition. I'm not waiting for your decision because there isn't a decision to make, she continued. I haven't been negotiating with you. I've been informing you of what humanity intends to do. We're going to continue expanding into the galaxy. We're going to continue advancing our technology at an exponential rate. We're going to continue solving problems that other species consider unsolvable. And we're going to continue making friends with anyone who wants to work with us. The only decision you have to make is whether you want to be one of those friends. She turned toward the chamber's main exit, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. Oh, and High Counselor, when your deliberation is finished, you can reach us through the standard diplomatic channels. But just so you know, we're not planning to wait around for your answer. We have 17 star systems to govern, 43 research projects that could revolutionize galactic civilization, and at least 6 new species that want to establish trade relations. In other words, we're busy. If you decide you want to work with us, we'll make time for you. If you decide you want to work against us. She smiled one last time, and it was neither friendly nor unfriendly, it was simply human. Well, that could be interesting too. Ambassador Chen walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber with a rhythm that sounded almost like a countdown dot. She was halfway to the doors when High Counselor Vexithara spoke again. Ambassador. She stopped but didn't turn around. Your species fascinates us, the High Counselor said, its voice carrying tones that the translation matrix struggled to render into human language. It has been 47,000 years since anyone has spoken to the Council as you have spoken today. How did that conversation end? Chen asked without turning. With the establishment of the Council itself. Ambassador Chen smiled, though none of the assembled delegates could see her expression. "Then you already know how this conversation ends," she said. And with that, she walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a galaxy that would never quite be the same. 6 months later, the first official council delegation arrived at Earth. They came not as conquerors or protectors, but as equals seeking to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. The galaxy watched with fascination as the Council, for the first time in 50 millennia, rewrote their foundational protocols to accommodate a species that had simply refused to accept the existing order. But perhaps more significantly, they watched as humanity kept its promises. Within 2 years, human innovations had solved 3 major galactic infrastructure problems. Within 5 years, human ships were serving alongside Council fleets in peacekeeping operations. Within 10 years, human research stations were making discoveries that revolutionized everything from medicine to faster-than-light communications. And when the first human was elected to the High Council, the acceptance speech contained only 7 words. "We told you this could be interesting." The galaxy, it turned out, had been waiting for someone to say no for a very long time. They just hadn't realized it until a small bipedal primate from a minor world in an unremarkable star system had the audacity to look at cosmic power and respond with a single, transformative word. Sometimes the most powerful response to impossible demands is the simplest one. Sometimes the future of civilization hinges on someone willing to stand up and speak a truth that changes everything. And sometimes that truth is just one word long.